Are you alone? Not in a professional sense, of course. I realize you may be on a team working with other colleagues, co-workers, or even family. No, I am far more interested in whether you are physically alone. Perhaps you're at a desk, on a couch, or if I'm particularly fortunate, near a window overlooking the street. If perchance you are blessed with some solitude, I must ask a request of some vital importance. Dim the lights in your room. If this is not possible, extinguish the lamp on your desk, for you must prepare yourself. The unnatural tale I will shortly and freshly thrust into the folds of your mind may very well damage you. That is, if you fail to take my sensible precautions. I am asking you to choose my company for your entertainment and to rapidly fund me $100 deposit, the receipt of which I require under some duress. But know this, prudent customer, although your proud airs may have as yet prevented you from procuring my theatrical wares, take heed. Pussyfooting around in here, wandering the discomforting passages, bumping your eyes again and again upon the letters I have placed upon the pages to come, may have a permanent effect on your reticular activating system. Alas, reckless follower, it is a dreadful experience to come. Yet still, a show is an experience, and life merely a collection of experiences, so you would be wise to choose your show carefully. Ordinarily, the wind of my whims would find warning you in this fashion quite beneath me. However, since you mistake me for but a brochure, it would appear that it is I who am quite beneath you. So, in the name of persuasion, I shall relate the true yet peculiar story of Riddlesbrood, a backstage pass, if you will, to observe not just the business, but that which stirred it into a being. A tale which will certainly mark the remainder of this solicitation as somewhat unorthodox. From here on, my account can only be properly appreciated from a place of comfort, a warm cup of coffee, and some suspension of disbelief. Accommodate me in these few modest requests, and I shall confide in you. Can you handle that? Wonderful. Now, empty your mind of thoughts and images, for I need a clean surface in which to paint upon. Good. That didn't take long. Next, you will forget all talk of discounts, services, and special promotions, for this story begins in a more colorful and curious manner, with faces. Scores of human faces all arranged among 2, 4, and 8-top tables. Tables covered with tan linens that dwelled in a modest banquet room stuck unnaturally to the rear of an old Victorian mansion. The mansion itself sat but a few blocks from the ocean, nestled among the many bed and breakfasts rooted there. The old gingerbread wood carvings, which adorned its wraparound porches, enjoyed the scent of salt blowing off of the beaches. The town itself, a quaint seaside resort echoing with the clap-clapping of horse-drawn carriages and distant rolling surf. What feelings the town conveys today, I do not know, but at the time, it did not contain a bit of excitement. No. It was 9 months pregnant with it. The faces I mentioned were attached to heads firmly affixed to casually dressed bodies, crammed into an audience. The eating throng faced a stage, and a handful of oddly costumed characters in a little arrangement we lovingly call dinner theater. Just imagine. The customers howled, filled with that playful giddiness one expects from vacationers. Aside from the laughter, the room reverberated with the sounds of crashing buspans, clinking glasses, and actors throwing jokes into the crowd. The large rectangular room smelled of chicken fingers and perfume, hairspray, and a hint of cigar smoke which drifted in from the bar. Antique stage lights painted white tried desperately to blend into the drop ceiling, dusty instruments that warmed the room like kitchen heat lamps. Colored beams shot from the lights and bathed the stage in a prismatic spray. The prop-cluttered playroom dripped with every hue, the set dressings richly congested like a 3D postcard. The walls of the room, from top to bottom, teased the eyes with decoration, a carousel turned inside out. And the performers, oh, they exploded into action like fireworks. The girls were sexy and the men madcap and overconfident. There were comical bits and improvisation, confetti cannons and flashpots. The wild characters jumped off the stage, their fertile minds irrigated by the laughter like fresh water. Another one-liner, another roar of applause, the swarm throwing bouquets of warm and happy laughter. They weren't human, they were actors, and I was proud to be one among them. It was during that moment, during that very night, that I first remember being able to actually see it lurking in the audience. And now, let me pause for a moment, reader. Focus on a word that you only think you know. The word is audience. You could, if you pondered at length, substitute the word crowd, or spectator, or even agglomeration of seated observers, whatever you wish, but it is important, critical even, that you know exactly what I mean when I use the term, for it is a thing you only half fathom. You hear the sound audience, and into your mind leaps the image of people sitting on plush red seats. You imagine old women, men, children, perhaps even yourself, holding a program and waiting for the curtain to rise. The truth is far more than this, far deeper and nearly inexplicable, for on that night I finally glimpsed the thing in the crowd and the cage which holds it. You see, once the curtain ascends and the house lights fade, those seated before the stage begin to undergo a strange alteration. As they focus their attention, they become not only outwardly silent, but mentally also. With each passing line the troopers play, the beholders become more bonded, blended, lost to any individuality. Whatever or whomever these people were will have disappeared, exposing only the darkness and mystery of their subconscious. Rich, poor, smart, or foolish, whatever their original makeup was is irrelevant. These traits have entirely sublimated. They are not the sum of lost individuals, but have become of one mind. They are something new, a being in its own right. I know this is confusing, but try to keep up. I told you I'd seen it, and that I did. I had performed 1,000 shows before that night and believe it was that familiarity which opened my eyes to it. Before I describe the ephemeral thing, you must grasp that I could only see it as I performed, as I spoke my lines and played my part. Only thus preoccupied can the spare portion of one's mind sense it. And before its presence reaches your eyes, it shivers your marrow. You feel it. Like receiving a voicemail from a dead lover or waking from a falling dream, you feel its birth in the room. The gist of space is different. The 10 feet before the stage tugs at your soul as if you dangled over an infinite chasm. Visually, it slowly appears as a curious blending of faces in the shadowy crowd. Then these faces seem to lift from the bodies like a mass beheading, floating forward and falling into neat rows and columns, the shining, gawking countenances arranging themselves like golden rosettes on a wrought-iron gate, their shapes becoming more symmetrical, more angular. Between these, a ghostly scintillation waves in the air, connecting them, an effect often mistaken for the glare cast by the stage lights. In all, it appears as if the entire crowd has become a portcullis, its 1,000 eyes standing guard between our world and... The creature lurks behind these bars, peeking between the faces, watching, gaping, caged behind the audience. You see its burning violet eyes, but more than anything, you sense its thirst. Your ears pop. Your mind hums with the sucking, unquenchable desire it has to be pleased. The ghastly rubbernecker feeds on the show like a vampire, and breathes as well, inhaling every joke and exhaling on every laugh. This is how it lives, reader. I didn't know then what I know now. That is the entity's other aspects, one even seasoned actors rarely grasp. The most secret power of all is not how it survives, but how it dies. For at the end of every show, as the being withers behind its bars and the barrier fades away, the onlookers collect themselves and leave the theater. They chat, giggle, and meander out of the doors, never suspecting that they have unwittingly carried a bit of its corpse home with them. Hours later, in their snug beds they fall asleep, and the purple-eyed fiend awakens again. And in their dreams, it seeks to make what it remembers real. And what does this creature forge while we rest our egos and lend them our minds? Everything! You guys were great, someone yelled, his words accompanied by a few hoots and hollers. The faces faded out, or so it seemed, as quickly as they had come. The actors struck a final pose as the patrons roared in affirmation, clinking champagne glasses in a slipshod unison. Then came the all-important blackout, that special darkness that seems to intensify ovation.
"Thank you,"
I returned in a nearly lost voice.
"You were a great audience."
As the lights slowly faded down, a peal of applause burst forth from the observers, slapping air, streamers, and metallic balloons gently kissing the ceiling. The darkness of the show's finale hid my quickening breath and my finger which wiggled in my ear to relieve the pressure. Where are you? I thought to myself. When the stage lights again hummed alive for the curtain call, the players took their final bows, one by one, each of them trying somehow to absorb the adoration. The thing behind the crowd had perished again, but this was not one of our shows, not by the Riddlesbrood Touring Theatre Company. You see, it was New Year's Eve, many, many years ago, at a small, sort of famous old dinner theatre by the sea, and we had not yet been born. Reluctantly, we retreated from the incandescence that had washed over us, cloaking our mortality. I made a short speech about leaving a tip for the waitstaff while the other performers ran for the bar, all but one.
"Hey, going to grab a drink?"
She asked.
"Not tonight."
I answered, trying to remember her name.
"Maybe."
I added a moment later. I moved behind the set into the dark, cramped niche we ridiculously referred to as backstage, tore the black hood off my head and used it to sop some of the sweat from my brow. On the wall in front of me was a long mirror, hung precariously with drywall screws. Over the mirror was a shelf supporting a blank gun, old scripts, and a few highball glasses, the last of which was still full of Diet Coke and vodka. I impatiently grabbed it and gulped it down. This'll help, I thought. A balloon popped, igniting gasps and laughter. The noise momentarily startled me before I awkwardly slipped off my boots from a standing position. The scent of old dust cooking on a hot light bulb filled the tiny space. I pulled a wet napkin from its package and began to draw out the black makeup from under my eyes. The first few wipes smeared more than they removed. Know, reader, that as your one and only articulator, I will likely tell you many things about me in the pages to come. Aspects of my appearance, character, some of the strange thoughts that drift through my mind. But my name? I think I'll keep that to myself. I looked into the blue eyes in the mirror for a few moments and listened quietly to the passing comments of the guests as they made their way out of the room. Suddenly, my father walked over.
"Hey, buddy, how'd the show go?"
He asked while intruding backstage. I pretended not to hear him as I looked for my shoes on the cluttered carpet.
I heard a lot of laughter. Think they liked us?
He asked again.
I think they liked me. Did she write her check yet?
He looked down and pretended to scratch a non-existent itch.
She's real busy,
he said.
With the Florida vacation coming up and all. Tell you what, kiddo, just pop in the theater a week from now, and it'll be ready for you.
I looked over to my empty glass, wishing it contained more than a few melting cubes. When I didn't answer, he opened his mouth again.
So you're taking off, right? I mean, tonight's definitely your last show,
he asked with an air of discomfort. I stepped up into the tech booth while he spoke, a small niche crammed with equipment attempting to add polish to the chaos. I leaned over to the mini-disc player, a device we used at the time to play the canned music for the show and sound effects. I hit the eject button and looked at the disc label. Master Sound Effects, it said. I pushed it back into the slot.
Yeah,
I replied.
I think it's for the best,
he said quietly and with relief.
It's crazy around here, and, she's a pain in the ass. You're better off. You understand, right?
As my father nervously waited for a reply, I hit a few buttons on the player. The display alarmingly blinked the words, Format Disc? Grinning, I then selected yes.
Sure. Yeah, I understand.
I answered at last, stepping out of the booth and back in front of the mirror. He smiled and gave me a pat on the back before he walked off toward the dining room. Not like you care anyway, you asshole, I thought. Before I go further, lovely reader, let me apologize for my profanity. I am more articulate and well-spoken today than I was those many years ago, as evidenced by my acclaimed writing style. Moreover, this great brochure is not intended for little children, nor those who think like little children. I further defend my foul language by way of my dark mood at the time. You see, the performance was over, and I was saddened by it. For while it lasted, the laughter and the desire to obtain it had drowned out the brutal troubles that hung over my future. I had smiled and joked through the entire evening. The gaudy New Year's Eve ball dropped in Times Square at midnight, and all the actors were tasked with keeping the customers busy till then, a chore I was in no mood to comply with. Be courteous of the fact that it was the millennium, the new ought-not moment some claimed would bring about the end of the world. For me, it seemed the profiteers were correct in their mad claims. I took the final sip of my drink before unbuttoning my costume and throwing it to the floor. Several photos were tacked to the wall, a memoriam of past shows and better times. I noticed a picture of myself smiling with a friend from a year before, my height accentuated by my arm wrapped oddly over his low shoulders. My tenure there had not always been so ill-fated. Indeed, I had labored for years at the theater, a so-called family business. In those early days, my job seemed a golden amusement ride, an entitled existence that can only be described as frolic, masquerading as employment. But it was the warm summer evenings that I loved the most, the glowing hours when all of life's meaning distilled into one simple word, showtime. I had mounted the stage nightly with an expert's ease, an arrogant joke thrower, bathing the audience in my flippant personality. I admit I thought I had laughing gas for breath. My comic confidence radiated out like magnetic fields, enveloping, attracting the crowd around me, forcing them to laugh at whatever I gave them. I was a young man who lived in the present and made a present of it. But the face staring back at me that night, peering at me from the looking-glass, bore no such smile. As time bled out and the years passed, it became increasingly clear that I was never meant to rise in importance there. For although I had been groomed for a comics career by my father, very quietly below the cheery surface simmered an ugly dysfunction. I was despised by the owner, an implausibly wicked woman whose rancid greediness floated about her like broken wind. To make matters worse, she was my father's wife. Now wait! I'm appraised of the fact that one cannot sum up a person's character in but a word. Actually, I stand corrected. In her case, it is effortless. The word is witch. Indeed, she had all the trappings of one, including a high-pitched cackle, the empathy of a strangler, and brown waxy hair that smeared down her cheeks like rotten apple butter. The thick glasses she wore made her eyes wide, white, and watery, like two plops of bird shit that shivered when she looked at you. Her mouth, too, was forever filled with a foul discharge, twisted and puckered like a cat's heinous and atonal wails. This crone often walked the creaky boards of the kitchen, sniffing for some actor or waiter to abuse, but instead of spells, she cast insults, as if athirst for the sight of suffering. If one were to call her little fiefdom a business, she would certainly be its queen, although her character was rarely throne-like, but a stool oftener. She knew nothing of theatre, yet it is difficult to explain the hackneyed exactness with which she played the part of a wicked stepmother. Her every encounter was an unlanced boil, stretched thin and ready to burst with wrongness. My gentle father had a nickname for his master, the Squirrel. And if you're the type that likes to laugh at cruelty, you might have called her surely funny.
10 minutes!
Yelled someone from the audience. Reasonably dry, makeup-free, and quasi-sober, I looked away from the mirror and peeked out into the hallway. The accumulation of random props, knickknacks, and oddities were stacked up as decorations there. Sitting on top of the clutter was a creepy Victorian doll with a brass clock sewn into its belly. The unusual timepiece boasted 10 minutes to midnight, and I had to admit the timing of my stepmother's final blow was perfect. The witch had, through incessant scheming, made my continued life there quite impossible. The season was over and my contract was not renewed. I had been fired without the unpleasant need to actually fire me, while my father, who was loath of any confrontation, did nothing to stop her devilish designs. In short, it was the murder of a long-cherished hope. I was left with nowhere to go but out. The long silent war was over, and I was proved the loser. Bravo. I stepped out and slowly made my way through the rabble and toward the side door. The other entertainers were mingling with the guests as I navigated my way toward the restroom. The customers were all carousing, drinks in hand, waiting for the big countdown to 2000. I couldn't help but find it ironic that my last day should be this one, surrounded by sounds of laughing partygoers and cheap noisemakers. How priceless that this pivotal turning of the century would but turn my stomach. It was in mixed feelings of anger and bewilderment that I observed those around me reveling in a new era to come. Their hopes embodied in drunken, bawdy cheers, while torn away was my life, with a cold, polite violence I had never experienced before. The well-crafted mask I wore never betrayed my true, enfeebled disconnectedness, as if I, an unwilling donor, were grasping desperately at my slippery organs being wrenched away. The line to the restroom seemed to be a mile long. At that rate, I would surely piss myself before making it there. I took one last look at the bar as I stood there holding my water when there she was, stepmother, staring at me from across the room. When our eyes met, the corners of her mouth curled slowly upwards. I vowed then and there to make it worse for her someday. But for now, both I and the creepy clock both rose our hands high. The end had arrived, and there was nothing left to do but flee, shoo, run. Happy New Year.